Well, as Nevada's economy grows, so does the demand for skilled workers. We're exploring the role career and technical education plays in training the future of our workforce. That's today on Nevada Week.
Support for Nevada Week is provided by Senator William H. Hernstat, Cashman Equipment, and additional supporting sponsors.
For the past year and a half, Vegas PBS has been engaged in an initiative called American Graduate, focusing on bringing more awareness and understanding to what are commonly called middle skills jobs. Now, these jobs typically require some form of education and certification after high school graduation, but not necessarily a four-year degree. Our state is focused on how younger residents, primarily 16 to 24-year-olds, are able to develop the skills needed for our new Nevada. The state of Nevada has set a goal of 60% of the workforce obtaining a post-secondary credential by 2025. Education serves a vital role in reaching that goal.
I don't think we have an unemployment problem. We have an under-preparation problem.
To explore the future of career and technical education and its effect on the workforce, we are joined by Bob Potts, Deputy Director of the Governor's Office of Economic Development, Lauren Gatto, Apprenticeship Navigator at Truckee Meadows Community College, Carrie Larnard, Director of the Clark County School District's Career and Technical Education Department, and Caleb Cage, Assistant Vice Chancellor for Workforce Development and Community Colleges for the Nevada System of Higher Education. Well, thank you so much for being here, all of you. We really appreciate it. Bob, I wanted to start with you. The term vocational is not really used anymore, and really middle skills seems like, and we've talked about this on previous shows, not necessarily a term that's really representative of what we're talking about when we're talking about some of the high skills that the workforce demands. My question to you is, economic and labor force demands over the last 10 years, what's really driven this shift to more of the higher skill need?
Well, I think overall we're seeing, the growth of technology has just been exponential, right? And how technology is changing every facet of in every industry. When we talk about industry sectors, we often talk about technology sectors. Technology cuts across all sectors, whether you're talking about manufacturing, whether you're talking about healthcare, whether you're talking about construction. All the sectors get touched by technology. And so when we talk about the difference in perception between the old vocational education and what we're calling career and technical education, it really comes back to the T in the middle, the technical side of things in my mind, and how that is really driving the change and how we need to think about where we were, where we are, and where we're going, not only economy-wide in our diversification efforts, but the workforce to support it and the staff that we need to support those industry growths. And
let's talk more about the diversification because of recession, right? It was one of the reasons why we looked at diversifying when we hit recession about 2007. Are we more recession-proof now that we've been able to diversify our economy, or yet are we still kind of in the early stages of that?
Well, I mean, there's been remarkable changes. So in the last 10 years, we've seen right now, we're about 30% more jobs than what we had back in the trough of the Great Recession back in 2010. A lot of people think about economic growth and economic development as being one and the same, and they're not. They're very highly correlated. They're very interdependent with each other. Growth has to do with the change over time. Development has to do with the change within that growth. And what we've seen is in our emerging sectors, whether you're talking about healthcare, aerospace and defense, whether you're talking logistics, operations, manufacturing, all of those sectors, they are growing and they're gaining ground. But it takes a long time to turn the Titanic. If you look at the industry mix in 2010 compared to the industry mix that we have now in 2019, you can't see a lot of change. But if you look at the 300,000 or so new jobs that we have, that net new jobs, they're significantly different, the mix is.
And Carrie, one of the things that we obviously need or dependent on is a workforce that is trained and skilled to be able to fill these emerging industries. What are some of the things you've seen that have changed in career and technical education at the middle school and high school level to kind of meet what some of these needs are?
I think one of the biggest short-term changes that we've made is really invigorating robotics programs in our middle schools and those moving up to the high schools. Just having kids instead of saying kids need to code, they now are coding, and it's fun and it's engaging, and they are picking up, for many of them, a screwdriver for the first time to build a robot, but then going back to the computer and doing the programming to get it to move. So I think giving kids, again, that technical touching and engaging program is really I think we're going to see huge changes in the number of students that are going to continue into STEM-related high school programs. About 3 years ago, one of the gentlemen in my office in Albachta started a Girls in Tech and a Girls in STEM program. He brings middle school students, middle school girls, to come and see
And Carrie, I want to stop you right there. You're talking about middle school children that are looking potentially at already a career pathway. Is that correct? Is that how early it's starting?
I don't know if I want to say that a 12-year-old's ready to choose their career pathway, but I think they need to know their options. And when there's math, science, English, and that's what you're doing in school, and maybe a fine arts program and PE, I don't understand that there are options out there for me. And so when we are able to put these programs now into middle schools and get kids to realize, oh my goodness, there's this whole world out there. I do want to take computer science, or maybe I want to take auto, or I want to go into all of these different pieces because I've had this one experience, and hopefully we've been able to show them lots of different things that get them engaged in wanting to move into these programs in high school.
Are there changes to just basic core courses like math and English that we're doing to then be able to pivot a student if they are to go into a career in technical education when they get into high school?
Definitely, and I think we have to be very cognizant of the fact there's a threshold. If I am a student who really wants to go into a computer science field, I have to be ready for algebra in 8th grade and really on a trajectory to get to trig and calculus and to be able to have the math to back up what's happening in my career tech program.
Now, Caleb, let's talk about the transition if we're following the career pathway here to secondary or post-secondary education. Not necessarily a 4-year degree for some of these jobs are required, yet we do need some form of post-secondary credential. At the 4-year university level, how are universities repositioning themselves to meet some of the demands on where our workforce is right now?
It's a great question. I think it's the question that the entire higher education sector is trying to figure out nationwide right now. And a lot of that is dependent upon the customer base for the education needs within that community. So for instance, in some of our more rural areas, you may have more of a focus on agriculture or on mining, where some of those industries are more prevalent. All of the areas that Nevada's system of higher education institutions serve have a focus on 10 high-demand occupations as determined by Governor's Office of Economic Development, our colleagues over there, and as well as emphasized by the Board of Regents. And so I think what we're seeing right now is individual institutions, community colleges, 4-year institutions, research institutions trying to figure out exactly what their local industry needs, what their customer needs are, and determining whether or not there's an apprenticeship program that might meet those needs, whether there is a pre-apprenticeship program where they might be able to work with Carrie or her counterparts throughout the state, or if there are specific shorter-term skill certificate programs that can be stacked into 4-year degrees, 2-year degrees, and beyond in order to meet those high-demand occupations in the state.
And you mentioned apprenticeships. Lauren, I want to talk to you a little bit specifically about apprenticeships, which is right in kind of your wheelhouse here. Truckee Meadows Community College has a very robust apprenticeship program, more manufacturing specific up in the northern part of our state. How have you seen apprenticeship programs kind of transform over the last 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, absolutely. So at TMCC, we were granted a grant from the Department of Labor, and that was extremely unique because, of course, we want to be very critical when it comes to the needs analysis within our community and what it is that they need. And there's been a huge influx, right, with our advanced manufacturing, with having Panasonic and Tesla on board, but then also understanding kind of what's projected and what positions are potentially going to be rising up and continue to rise. And we found that healthcare, specifically nursing, is something that is truly needed in our community. And so what we've done with Nevada's apprenticeship project at TMCC is we've created a CNA, a Certified Nursing Assistant Apprenticeship Program. And these individuals have the opportunity to work full-time at the hospital as well as taking their related technical instruction with TMCC. So at the end, they have a certificate from the Nevada State Board of Nursing, and they can then have additional doors open up if they want to continue with nursing, radiology, healthcare, or stay in that CNA position, which is something that's extremely needed right now.
Bob, let's talk about just greater benefits here. We're hearing some of just the individual workforce benefits of being able to kind of have a career ladder and move up. But when we're looking at kind of the broader economic impact of really focusing on this career and technical education aspect of our workforce and our labor market, why is that so important?
I'm going to summarize it. I mention this most all the time whenever I talk to people. Is it qualified and available workers that attract great companies, or is it great companies that grow a qualified and available workforce? And the answer to both those questions is yes. And as we as a state and all the partners that we work with, work closely with TMCC, the entire INCHE system, Department of Education, we work across the board. I think that's very unique in our state, where we have a system-wide approach, a systematic, system-wide approach where we're being very intentional, talking about where we want to go, where things are headed, and how we're going to support that going forward. If I look at companies that we work with all the time, number one, top 10 list. 3 of the top 10 on that list have to do with qualified and available workforce. What do you have for educational capacity? What do you have in the way of these career and technical positions, right? That's what, if we don't have the right workforce, we can't do our job from an economic development perspective. So me coming back and providing guidance for education and workforce development, talking about what those in-demand occupations are, and having those on board either to help existing workers out there when we have these really low unemployment rates like we have right now, and figuring out ways to help them upskill into rewarding careers and jobs where they don't have to quit their day job or an apprenticeship program or those kind of efforts. That not only makes it better for the state as a whole, but every individual that makes up this state. So all these partnerships, I think the overarching thing that I've seen happen in the last 10 years is a system-wide approach, education and workforce development, where economic development can help provide guidance and where things are going and where we see the future of the workforce. And then how do we help INCHE, the Department of Education, how do we help folks provide guidance into developing out those programs?
Excellent. We'll talk more about some of the larger system level strategies in just a sec. I want to come back to just where we are now, Caleb, and we mentioned in the intro this goal of 60% is the kind of the overarching goal our state has of getting some form of post-secondary credential after high school, not necessarily a four-year degree, but some form of industry credential. Do we have any idea of where we are now in 2020 as it approaches on reaching that goal?
It's a great question. I don't, off the top of my head, know where we are exactly on that goal right now. I can say that we met just a few weeks ago with Carrie and her team about, as well as the College of Southern Nevada, about articulation between the CTE program at the Clark County School District and the system of higher education. That Truckee Meadows, our partners throughout the state, and the institutions throughout the state are continuing to develop those based off of industry need. And they are building them to meet those needs. They're pursuing grants through Bob's office. And to dovetail back into what Bob was saying a moment ago, I couldn't agree more with the system level approach. This is a very complex system. If you see how workforce development is outlined from a federal funding standpoint, from the different buckets of federal funding and through the different state and local agencies that it filters through, that money and those policies filter through, it really is quite complex. But in Nevada, with the Office of Workforce Innovation, Department of Employment Training and Rehabilitation, Governor's Office of Economic Development, and INCHE at the state level, really is, I think, coordinating these systems to meet those goals and to meet, in our world, to meet the INCHE, the 5 objectives of the INCHE strategic plan right now as well.
And one of the things we've talked about around the table here is the connection to industry and the employers here. We don't have an employer, unfortunately, around the table right now, but in previous shows we have talked to employers. Victor Fuchs, who is the CEO of Helix Electric, talked about awareness, and we have a clip right now to show you. Take a look.
It needs to start from grassroots. I think we need to get back to high schools, middle schools, and make these kids aware of these type of skill set and these type of careers out there. I don't think we're doing a good enough job today making this happen.
So, Carrie, I want to ask you, here we have an employer that's not necessarily aware of some of the opportunities and resources we have at the high school level. On your end, what are you seeing? Are you seeing a lot more awareness, especially in the last several years, on where industry and employers are and understanding what we have in the secondary high school education side?
I think we do in pockets. I'll say down here, the Nevada Contractors Association has become highly engaged with our system, and we were at a meeting with them. They did a panel discussion with all of our construction and furniture and cabinet making teachers. And one of the things they said was, you know, we really want kids to come out with OSHA 10 certification. It'd be great if they had CPR and AED. That had never been on my radar, that would be a great certification for kids to have, but we can make that happen in high school. They wanted forklift. We do that in high school. And so just having the discussions of here's a certification that we really want, and then us being able to provide that even before they leave high school has just opened up doors. They're sponsoring schools. They were working with Desert Rose Tech Center, where students were getting their first job and they were being scholarshiped with their first tool belt, their boots, things that they need when they get to that job, but that communication doesn't, seamlessly happen right now between these employers and these families. And so we're trying to bridge all of those gaps. So I think in pockets we're doing a great job. There definitely is room for growth, and I think we've taken the charge that we actually aren't even opening programs in CTE anymore unless they're aligned with GoEd's 4 workforce goals. So we're not going to open a floral class, because that's certainly not something that's rising on the job market. But we've started closing quite a few of our business and marketing programs, and they're kind of shrinking in size, and yet that's a forecast that's saying, nope, that's going to be a pretty significant part of the workforce. We've got to do a better job now of maybe looking at our standards and making sure that those standards are meeting what workforce is going to need, and we've got to look at growing some of those programs in our schools. And so we're being much more cognizant of what those workforce needs are, trying to connect with our actual employers in Southern Nevada, and aligning what we're doing in our classrooms to make them happy, or to at least say, we're making the effort, we're going to turn out kids who have at least this level of skill set that you've asked for, rather than us just thinking we know. We're sitting around the table now, and that hasn't happened for a very long time. I think the last 2 years have been exceptionally, I think there's just a different synergy now. There's a real synergy with the business community and education to get together and make things happen.
And let's talk more about that synergy. Also, on another show, we talked about collaboration. We had Perry Ursum on from the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance, and he talked a lot about kind of bridging that gap between the employers and the industry and education. Let's take a look at that clip really quick.
It's getting industry in touch with our educational partners. It's getting industry in touch with our workforce development resources. Economic development, 4 years ago, our organization started this business retention and expansion program. And what we found through the last 4 years is really being that bridge between what industry is doing and what education is doing. There is a limited amount of bandwidth on both sides for their ability to make that connection. We're very fortunate in our role where we're able to kind of bridge that gap.
So Lauren, let's talk to you about the community college side of this. Now, you already mentioned the nursing programs. Tesla obviously is a big factor up there too. How are you trying to then bridge those gaps a little bit more through a program like apprenticeships?
Absolutely. So something that's pretty unique that TMCC does is they have advisory committee boards. And so what those are, you're bringing industry partners as well as key partners in the community, faculty, staff, all around the same table to have those discussions, to talk about curriculum input, what type of technology software, what are the trends that you're seeing that are happening, because we want to make sure that we're preparing those students so that they can be successful employees when they go into the specific industry. With the apprenticeship, we're also trying to expand in the state of Nevada and making sure that we go directly to the employer and have those conversations and to see what it is that you need for your employees. And like you mentioned, it's extremely important that we do see that with the middle skill jobs, they don't quite need that 4-year degree, but they will need that high school diploma. And so we have that sweet spot, but we don't want to stop that momentum. So something that TMCC has done is we've developed a bachelor's in cyber physical manufacturing. So that's going to expose students to augmented reality, as well as being able to visualize and manipulate an entire production line remotely. So we definitely want to look at that sweet spot, but we want to continue the momentum if students want to pursue additional academic goals.
And Caleb, let's look at the four-year university system here. And when we're talking about looking at what employers want, and we're talking about a very, very high level of skills that we need, even to obtain a post-secondary degree at a community college level, but yet high levels of four-year degrees as well. Do you see those two kind of meshing together, where there's a system here where you can receive a credential, still potentially go towards a four-year degree?
Yeah, I think that will be where the higher education practice heads in the next decades. In the 4 months that I've been on this job here, one of the things that I keep hearing over and over again is the fourth industrial revolution, mostly from Bob Potts's office, and this idea that we're going to be experiencing automation, either the positive or negative consequences of automation across the workforce in the near term. And because of that, people are going to need to go to have the opportunity to go to training and education programs for shorter periods and for longer throughout their lives. So it may start in a K-12 CTE program. It may continue in a certificate program through a community college. But all of those programs need to be articulated, and they need to be, and by that I mean your work in K-12 needs to count towards higher education when possible, and it needs to be stackable, and it needs to be so that somebody can go in leave high school, get a certificate and training in welding, work a job in welding, and continue their education on the side. That's one example of it. Some of the more professional fields like doctors and nurses, we're seeing stackable efforts. You heard about the apprenticeship CNA program earlier, and the idea of being able to move from a CNA to an RN and BSRN program or degree later on down the road as well. So I think that is very much going to be the model in the future, and I think that the schools in Nevada, the INSHE, the System of Higher Education Institutions, are very much looking at their entire structure with that in mind.
Mm-hmm. Bob, we just have a few minutes left. Let's go to some calls to action here, and let's talk about legislation. We have had a lot of activity, maybe not so much in the last session, but the session previous to that, and then the session in 2015 as well. Dual credits came on board, the apprenticeship office came on board, the workforce innovation office came on board. We did a lot. What would you like to see as we approach our 81st legislative session related to workforce that you think is really key?
So I'm going to go back and talk about the system-wide efforts that have been done, and we've referred to them back and forth. A lot of those system-wide efforts are rooted back going to the 2015 session. I think particularly how CTE received $7 million in funding, but they really needed guidance on where economic development priorities were going, and everything, tying all these strategic plans together so that there's cohesiveness, so the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, right? And I think that we're really starting to see those things, but we're at a stage now where we really need to review those, all those efforts, those accomplishments, and then we need to start rolling in, where are we going in the future? What is automation going to mean in the future? And how's that going to affect our workforce? And how are we going to stay in front of that? I think we need to refine when we're talking about career exploration down to the middle school kids. I think that is really, really key. And career exploration about what the future of work looks like, right? We have a new administration where we're really trying to create opportunities for everybody. You know, not just get people back to work, but get them work in great jobs that are rewarding, fulfilling, and have a long-term future for them. So I think we're at a perfect time to, I mean, if you don't repot the plant once in a while, it gets root bound. To keep everything healthy, we ought to review and maybe repot a little bit and make some changes on that. But don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Let's keep moving forward with what we've got.
And Carrie, we have just a little bit under a minute, but this all takes funding. Not only secondary education funding, but post-secondary education funding throughout the whole piece of this too. If you were to target one thing in the secondary education realm that really could use a lot more funding to really kind of expand what you're doing, what would it be?
I think we're missing a key part, and that's our teacher pipeline. And if we do not do something about growing our own teachers and really expanding our work with teacher recruitment, retention, and pay, we aren't going to compete on any of these levels. If I don't have a qualified math teacher, that kid's not making it through cybersecurity programs. If I don't have a cybersecurity teacher who's willing to leave industry, which they're not willing to do because our pay is so substantially different, we have to do something about really looking at how we're going to reinvigorate our education system with teachers, because otherwise these efforts are going to be fruitless, and we're going to turn out very small pockets of qualified students when we could be really hitting a huge mark here for our workforce.
And a lot of these sectors and a lot of these industries we're talking about, they're very lucrative jobs, so getting the individuals from those jobs into the teaching positions is a challenge in itself.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We're out of time, but we really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, if you at home would like to learn more about any of the topics that we've covered today, please always check out our website at vegaspbs.org/Nevada-week. There you will also be able to find other workforce-related shows we've done in conjunction with the American Graduate Initiative, and those are definitely shows that we've talked about here. You can also stay up to date with us off-air by following us on social media at Nevada Week. Thank you so much.